Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order of the City of Walker Planning Commission. The minutes from the last meeting will be reviewed at the next Planning Commission meeting. So the third item on the agenda is a general public comment. This is an opportunity to speak to generally non-agenda items. There'll be several items here that be going over this evening, but if you have any comments that you'd like to share, you have 3 minutes to be able to come up, identify yourself, give your address, and share with us your thoughts. Seeing no takers, we'll move into the agenda items. First item is a courtesy site plan review for a proposed addition to a school. And Paula Preby, the city's planning director, will introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. I will pull up the site plan here for reference as I go through some of the highlights of my staff report. This is a addition request to Covenant Christian High School, which is located at 1403 Ferndale Avenue in South Walker. The plans show an addition for a second gymnasium, locker rooms, auditorium, vocal music room, and industrial arts classrooms, as well as expanding the parking area and some stormwater detention to the east side of the site. It's been city policy that school projects only receive courtesy site plan review because Michigan law limits local zoning review of school projects. So that was the plan here. We review this project on a courtesy basis. The site plan review committee met with the applicant at the end of February, on February 29, provided feedback based on what's in the plan. The major concern that I have about it, almost everything looks in line with our ordinance requirements for a courtesy review of this type. The major outstanding item is the amount of parking on the site. In the past, in both 2010 and 2016, the school went to the city's zoning board of appeals to get variances due to not having enough parking on site for the uses inside the building. At the time, they were both granted the variances and allowed to move forward. There were notations at the time, though, that variances would be required for parking if there were additional expansions proposed. Since then, in 2022, the school applied again for a courtesy site plan review for the addition of 4 more classrooms, and at that time it was determined that the existing parking on site and existing parking agreements with a nearby church and school had meant there was sufficient parking for the use. So it didn't require a variance at that time. It appears that those variances are still in effect, however, and there are additions. So if the parking is shown to not be sufficient, I would recommend that the project go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, in speaking with the applicant late last week when some of this came up, they provided me with some more information and numbers related to those agreements with Hope Church and the nearby school. And the parking lot addition to the north that's affiliated with this school, they believe there is sufficient parking on site. So I have that information to pull up on the screen later, and I encourage the board to discuss that with the applicant. This is a courtesy review at this time, there's no formal action for the board, so I don't have a formal recommendation. My primary concern is related to the amount of parking being sufficient for the needs of the school with the new auditorium, second gymnasium, etc. But beyond that, I'm happy to answer questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Paula. Commissioners, any questions for Paula at this point? With regard to the conversation about the parking, I think it's worth having that conversation, and we would welcome the applicant when they come up to speak to that. Okay, now we'll move to City Engineer Scott Connors for his review.
A couple quick items for us. You'll notice there's a driveway proposed off Wilson Avenue that is proposed just for construction access. But I guess I bring up the warning that we had a similar driveway that was put in on West Michigan Academy of Environmental Science at Leonard Street, and that driveway ended up staying, and then it was, hey, we're just gonna use this for deliveries to the cafeteria, and now it's staff parking lot. So if you feel strongly about not allowing that driveway, I think it's important for you to have a talk about that and then put that on the record, just so that MDOT can see that. But we'll leave that up to you. The other issue I was gonna bring up, it's not really an issue, is to point out that they still have to get a stormwater permit and soil erosion permit. So those aren't exempt because they're a school. And if you looked at the stormwater plans, it was a little difficult to read, but the crosshatch area off to the southeast of the parking lot there is all existing detention pond that was from their last expansion. So when the pipes kind of disappear off to the southeast, it's because they overflow the controls that they're proposing here, and they go into that existing detention pond. So we'll cover that with a thorough review at staff level.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Again, any questions for Scott on his report?
Yeah, that was just my question about that drive. Is they're just planning on using it for construction, but then we're still putting in like the standard driveway entrance that they're gonna plan on leaving at M11? I guess that was a question I had.
Yeah, and I guess I can't answer it, kind of an odd answer, because it's really an MDOT answer. It won't be a city standard driveway. It'll be whatever MDOT allows from a temporary standpoint in terms of the geometrics and, radii and things like that. It would probably be wise to ask the applicant to clear that up.
I guess to follow up on that, I meant to check that out previously, but I didn't. At the main drive, right, the current main drive onto Wilson, is that have a third lane for turning or not?
I believe the third lane extends to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, the third lane on Wilson you're talking about
Yeah.
goes through there. Yeah, it drops right before Hall Street.
Okay.
Yep, there it is.
All right. And they'll have that same provision with that temporary drive, so that sounds like with the construction traffic, they would want to utilize that center turn lane for movements in and out during the construction period.
And that did come up during site plan review.
Okay, all right. Okay, at this point, if there's no other questions, have the applicants come forward, if you would, please. Representatives, again, give us your name and address, and share with us your perspective on the project.
Good evening. My name is Rick Norman. My address is 7976 Hearthway Avenue in Jenison. And I'm the principal at the high school. This is my 27th year there, and glad to be there, and glad to be back here again too. Appreciate the work that you do here. Just a little bit about not the nuts and bolts, but about what we're trying to do here. This expansion is driven somewhat by enrollment increases that we're projecting, but that's not the greatest thing. Much of this project is for the enhancement of our programs and improving the quality of life within the school community. These enhancements come in the form of a dedicated applied arts facility. Right now we're teaching applied arts. We have a wood shop that's set up in a classroom, and we want to set that up in a wood shop. And also we'll be able to expand our applied arts into other areas, and then we'll have safe and proper facilities for that. We also are looking to have an auditorium concert hall so that we could have on-site our concerts. Right now we have to go to Jenison. We typically fill the Jenison auditorium there for concerts, and we have to move everything over there and bring everything back, and just want to have things on site and have a place for our chapel that currently meets in the gym once a week. We have to set up all the chairs and take down all the chairs, and we'll have this all. So it really is a quality of life thing for that. And then the additional gymnasium too is we currently have, with all of our sports teams, we have practices going from 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, and we want our kids to get home. And so we can run all those practices, then get everybody out of there by 6 o'clock, home for dinner, and just make things work out nicely. So overall, there's going to be some additional use, but a lot of it is just mostly just looking for quality. We've been running what we think are top-notch quality programs in facilities that don't really meet our expectations, and traveling to other facilities, having to work with their schedules for our events, and it just makes it difficult. We're very excited about the project. We've received tremendous support from our constituents. The vote of our association meeting was nearly unanimous to approve the project. I think we had maybe 10 minutes of discussion about a project of this size, and it just flew through, so it's really good support. We understand our responsibility to be good neighbors. We're part of a neighborhood, and the neighborhood is part of us. We realize that. We work hard to manage the parking at our events. We know that when we have big things that it can be a strain on things, and we try to do that. So we have parking control people to direct traffic, to keep the lot filled. If parking should go onto the road, we limit it to one side of the road so that we can have good traffic flow through there yet. And we're always open to input from our neighbors. We have good communication with them, and we try to do all that we can to maintain the standards expected of us, and to continue to be a vibrant part of that South Walker community. We don't want to have any battles, and this is what we strive for. So appreciate your thoughts on this and your work with the planning.
I've hired several of your students, and they're good workers and just wonderful human beings. I've been impressed with the caliber of people you turn out over there.
Yeah, we have good
And
people.
another thing is you've got 2 schools and a church too, so it isn't just the school parking, is it? And most of the people go to the same church, don't they?
No, well, we draw from all over West Michigan, really. Kids come from a long ways, from various churches that all center on the one place, one school. There's 4 feeder schools that feed into this one high school. Yep. I don't know if I can say anything about that temporary drive, but in my opinion, that we do not want that drive to remain there once construction is done. I've studied the traffic patterns there by school at over 27 years and seen things develop. One of the things that happens is that sometimes our students will leave and they'll go to, rather than exit our driveway, they'll go down to River Bend Avenue to exit. And what happens is that every opening in the traffic just gets filled up, and then it just keeps getting backed up. So if we were to have any other exit there onto Wilson, it would just cause problems at the other place. So I think we're only looking to keep the heavy equipment construction off from our regular school driveway and out of our regular parking lot. That's my thought. So I think Kevin Gritter's going to address that too. Any other questions in regard to the general school?
Any other questions for the principal? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Gritters. I'm a civil engineer with Prine and Newhoff. Take a few of the questions. Since we're on that temporary construction driveway, we've been working with MDOT on the permit for that. The geometry of the driveway is something that MDOT is requiring for a temporary driveway, and part of their permit will have a sunset clause. So they're saying it has to go away by, I think right now it's August of 2026. So where we anticipate the end of this construction project being, they're saying it has to be gone there. So you can do whatever you will, but that's what MDOT's requirement will be. The stormwater that Mr. Connors mentioned, I believe the contractor has started the process for the soil erosion permit already, and will be working through the stormwater permit as well. And then the parking, I think that was the last one that we needed to talk about. The parking situation, I think I saw that Paula had a summary there. So historically, we've used the calculations that are in that upper section, the required spaces. And for all the previous calculations, we've based the requirement number on 1 space per 2 staff members and then 1 space per 21 square feet of usable floor area in the largest meeting space. Using those numbers, about 40 staff members would be 20 spaces, and then the new gymnasium, which is the largest area, usable floor area there is about 14,700 square feet, which would equate to the 701. So 721 total would be that requirement. I saw in the planning report there were some other calculations that resulted in a lower number. So I'm not 100% sure if this is correct, but I'll just run through this calculation just because that's what we've used in the past. So required 721 might be the number, might be less, I think. For the proposed parking spaces with the construction of this project, you able to maybe pull up that map again, the Google Earth map? You can see on this site that there are 3 main parking areas. There's going to be what we call the south lot, is that large one on the south end right there, thank you. And there's about 262 spaces there. There will be the new parking area immediately east of the new building, which is right where she's pointing now with where the old softball field and old soccer field are. There will be about 205 spaces there. And then the new lot up at the athletic complex along Hall Street has about 126 spaces. So among those 3 locations, we have about 593 spaces total on site. And then there are agreements, and there have been for a long time, with the church and the school. The church parking lot is about 0.2 of a mile from the school building. The school parking lot, if you come down and stay on the road, which you don't necessarily have to do, it's about 0.4 of a mile away. And between those 2 locations, there's 200 spaces that off-site church and school have agreed to work with the high school to use those areas if needed. So then with the 593 on site and the 200 just off-site, the total existing and proposed, including those agreements, is that bottom line number of about 7 compared to the 701. So those are the numbers that I put together late last week. Happy to take any questions or comments on that.
Any comments, questions? Paula, that jives with how you've looked at it as well?
Yeah, it's pretty close. To Mr. Gritter's point, the way they made this calculation here is different from how I did, because the 1 space per 21 square feet of usable floor area for the largest meeting space is a standard that's in our old ordinance and hasn't carried through to our new ordinance. So the way it would be done today is you would calculate for the classrooms and for the meeting rooms separately. But again, as this is a courtesy review and they can show that they have close to the right number of parking, my concerns are significantly lessened.
Okay. And I believe from the history that you provided on the past zoning board action, there were requirements to show evidence that there were agreements with the other 2 entities further to the south to be able to share parking on those high traffic nights events. Okay. All right, that
I agree with the parking.
okay. Tom?
I got a question on that temporary drive. Maybe this is common knowledge. When that is supposed to be done, let's say August 2026 or whenever that is, does that mean you vacate or just stop using it, or do you have to restore that drive? Restore the drive?
It has to be removed entirely, and planted grass, and they even wanted a couple trees planted across where the driveway was too.
You essentially wanna like close it up like it never existed, so that's why planting trees and stuff to prevent further people from using it.
Okay.
Do you anticipate people trying to use that temporary drive for like additional parking or stuff, or how do you anticipate maintaining that closed off during construction?
During construction, there will be construction fencing basically along the north edge of the main entrance drive into the school, and it will block off that whole area. So that whole area where the construction will be occurring will be completely blocked off from any student, teacher traffic.
And then one other question about the parking, because you're gonna lose the spots when you put this new building in, when do you propose that construction would begin so that you can still maintain parking, or would you have your students have to park further down than your teachers?
That's a great question, and it's something that we're working through, and the school is working through with those logistics. With that south parking lot and the Hall Street lot, there's plenty adequate parking for routine day-to-day use. It's gonna be those larger events that have to be accommodated elsewhere, and that's where maintaining those agreements with the church and the school, and we're planning to have some site work in this area completed early on so that it potentially can be used. We're not gonna have obviously the full amount until the project is 100% complete, but we'll be doing as much as we can in a safe way to restore parking, possibly some in this area, during construction for those main events.
Okay. Pat?
I'm good with the parking. The only thing, and I'm sure you guys schedule these things, so there's not gonna be two events on the same night where you would then be completely overbooked. So, I mean, I guess that's all about scheduling, so.
Right,
Like if
and
you had a musical and a basketball game and whatever else going on.
yeah, I think I can speak that there would never be that scheduled.
Never say never. But I hear you.
Scott, just wanted to get a clarification. Is there, the other Scott, was there any, the capacity for stormwater, is that sufficient to serve this expansion then?
They'll have to prove that up, but I'm confident that they've got enough capacity there to make that work.
Okay, all right.
To that point, the area for detention will be immediately south of that temporary construction drive. It's shown there just in outline form, but there's volume there for the 100-year storm management there, which would then outlet to the south to that hatched area, which is the existing stormwater management area.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm trying to recall, as a courtesy review, do we pass a motion or no? We just shared the conversation,
Okay,
and we thank you for coming in.
thank you for having us.
All right.
Good night.
Before you leave, is there anyone in the audience that had some questions about this project? If you want to come forward and share your thoughts.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Michael Langlois, 4583 Julian. I just had a couple of quick questions for the site planners. Now, that retention pond that you're building, that's east of the proposed parking lot, correct? And that will handle all the overflow capacity. Is there any plans to use the swamp to the west of the property? Is it going to be an isolated system?
Yeah, please.
There are no plans to use the low area to the west of the property. The project does include reconstructing some of the storm sewer pipe immediately north of the current gymnasium, but there will be nothing done at the west end of the property.
Okay, is there any plans for high-rise lighting for the new parking lot?
Lighting in the parking lot, you want me to come up and give my name?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Neil Bauman with the Design Forum Architects. There will be lighting in the parking lot. The lighting will, we'll do it as we would for any municipal standard. It'll be low profile, low cutoff fixtures that will be designed to minimize or eliminate lighting that's spilling over at the property line. So it'll all be contained within our parking areas. I'm not sure if that answers the gentleman's question or not.
Yeah, I was curious if there was plans to prevent light escape from the property with the new.
Yeah, no, we will make sure that we're using fixtures that contain the light through the property.
That's what you said about the last time. We can't open our windows in the summer because the lights blast in and light up our entire bedroom because they're so high and humid. It's like daylight in the bedroom in the summer. You know, if you don't have the drapes pulled.
It would be helpful if somebody would show us which lights are doing that, and maybe because we're changing so much of what's happening on the site, that it may just take care of that problem for you.
So, yeah, would you mind, when this is done right here, if you could talk with them, find out where they
Sure.
are?
Sure.
Because they said they were going to be not headed to the top of the buildings to light up everything. It's just ridiculous. I'm not happy with it, but
No, I'd be happy to discuss where they are and what we can do to eliminate the issue.
it'll be eliminated partly when they get rid of the garage, which is in that area. But at that time, it'll be brighter on us. As it is now, it's in the summertime, it's like daylight all night or until we turn off the lights.
Well, it'll be different when there's just a big parking lot there. There won't be any of those kind of fixtures coming off a building. They're all low cutoff fixtures, so it'll throw light down and not to the side. So I think it's gonna resolve your issues for you, but I'd be happy to sit with you after we get done here. You can,
That's what the last engineer told us, the same thing, and he assured us that they were not going to be shielded lights and everything.
Well, I think Mr. Bauman will help you out in getting the information here then.
sure.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, thank you very much to the school people for coming in and going through the review with us. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, case number 24-002 at 3500 Alpine Avenue. Again, Paula Preby, Planning Director, will introduce the project.
Thank you, Chair. I have pulled up on the screen the site plan for this project. Before I come back to that, though, let's fly across the city, and I will orient you to where we're looking here. So we're going kind of all the way across Walker on Alpine here. It's the southeast corner of Alpine and Kingsbury. This is the lot that, the subject lot for case 24002. And this is the site plan. So we're at Alpine Avenue going north-south and Kingsbury Street going east-west there. This property and the site plan may look familiar to the Planning Commission. The applicants submitted for site plan review for this site with an almost identical building in 2022. The property is split zoned. Let me pull that up for you quickly here in my staff report. As you can see, this orange bounding box here is the site, and it is zoned C1 to the west and SA suburban residential to the east. Because more than half of the lot is zoned commercial, we'll use the commercial C1 regulations for the site plan review. It is a commercial project. And as they abut residential, there are some buffer requirements that come into play. As I said, in October of 2022, the applicant came to the Planning Commission and received site plan approval. However, that approval is good for 1 year. They need to move forward with the project within 1 year. There's a provision where an applicant could come back for a 1-year extension if the board grants it. As that didn't happen and they now wish to move forward not quite 2 years later, they're back with a different tenant but an almost identical building. It was a medical office. This time it is proposed to be a veterinary clinic. The applicant met with the site plan review staff committee on February 29th and was provided feedback. Almost all of the planning and zoning things I would look at and bring to your attention have been met, with one exception, and that is regarding the landscape plan. I'm going to scroll through here and pull up that landscape plan for you. There we go. This is the landscape plan, as I said, because they submitted previously. That was submitted and approved in 2022. Since then, we've adopted an updated zoning ordinance that has slightly different regulations, particularly as regards the buffer on the east side of the lot over here, where it is commercial to the west and a single-family residential home immediately adjacent to the east. So that requires some buffering. The old ordinance requirements was the type B buffer, which is a 15-foot wide section with 5 trees and 5 shrubs per 100 linear feet. So you can see here, there's a number of trees, some evergreen trees, some shade trees, and a number of shrubs. And that met the ordinance requirements at the time. The new requirements give an applicant in this situation of a commercial use next to a residential use options of a deeper landscape buffer, 30 foot with 1 tree and 8 shrubs per 30 feet of property line, or a narrower 10-foot landscape area with a staggered double row of evergreens which form a complete screen, or a masonry brick or vinyl fence at least 6 feet tall designed to completely screen the properties from one another. In this case, there is the 15-foot buffer with 4 shade trees, 7 shrubs, and 7 evergreens. I don't have any issues with this. It met the old requirements. It doesn't meet the current requirements, but the landscape standards are up to the Planning Commission's discretion. If you are comfortable with this screening, you can approve it. If you wish to, you can require the applicant to change the landscape plan to be the other sides of the property roughly meet the ordinance requirements, so I'm not concerned about those. It's particularly where the new building in that drive will abut the residential property immediately next door. I did try to get some photos of that area. It's hard to tell. There is a fence now in the back. I apologize, that's kind of small. You can see it on both of these images of the existing building. So there is a fence there that I believe will stay. It appeared to be on the residential side, but I'm sure the applicant can speak to that more clearly. Overall, I recommend approval of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Paula. Commissioners, any questions, comments?
I come from a family of veterinarians, so I wondered about barking dogs. Is that a noise going to be a problem with this?
It's a great question to pose to the applicant when they come up. I can't speak to that.
I had a question on the shell part of the building. I know the facade we talked about. It's under the site plan elevations. It's not in this set.
Did I pull it? Yep, I have it up here.
So it says it's for the proposed medical shell building. Do they propose to do the same one for the vet building? On this plan sheet, it's labeled as the medical shell.
Yes, I believe I asked about that at site plan review committee and was told that they're using the same. It appears that sheet didn't get updated. So if the plan is approved, I would recommend that gets updated and corrected for the final
Do we
submission.
need to add that as a condition then if we approve it? Or was that written in your report? I just didn't see it in your report.
I would add as a condition. It's not listed currently.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Then we'll move to Scott Connors, city engineer.
So the sidewalk for this site is a little difficult to build, and it's going to require a sidewalk easement, and we would recommend that that be recorded and provided to us before building permits get issued, just so that it doesn't get missed. The existing driveway out to Alpine Avenue is going to be reconfigured as a right-in, right-out. That'll be under the permitting control of MDOT, so it may not be completely clear from the drawing, but there is a note there that mentions that. The site, I think you could also see on the landscape plan that the site has underground detention shown on the south part of the parking lot. We want to point out that photographs and inspection reports are required for that. And then lastly, they are proposing to get out into the road with a new sanitary sewer lateral, or close to the road at least. And we would ask that they use the existing lateral from the existing building. I trust that that was just something they couldn't find in time to show, but we would urge that to make sure that we don't have one that's just hanging out there and not being used. That's it for us.
Commissioners, any comments, questions? Okay, thank you. I'll turn to the applicant. If you can step forward, please.
Good evening, Mitchell Harvey with Stonefield Engineering, 607 Shelby Street. With me tonight is Greg McDade. He's representing the applicant here tonight with Walker Retail Investments, LLC. So I hope this site is familiar to most of you, if not all of you. We basically are coming in with the exact same site plan that we had before. Essentially, we're just swapping out the veterinary clinic to the medical use. Such a quick change in just use that we forgot to update the architectural plans to say veterinary clinic, but it will be the exact same building that's shown on those elevations. 23 parking spaces where 18 are required. Access will remain the same as existing. We've been working with MDOT. We have MDOT's approval. Just a little item of clarification. They've approved us for a left in, but not a left out. So it's going to be left in, right in, and just right out, if that makes sense. The landscaping area in the back, if we could go to that plan, I just want to touch on that. We were, really we're open to what you would prefer, whether it's the 10-foot landscape setback with the staggered evergreens. But kind of looking at this, we have, we have that staggered evergreen screening for a piece there, and then we kind of cap that evergreen with some deciduous trees, and then we will be maintaining that that vinyl fence. I believe it is the neighbors, but it's just slightly on our property, but we have we call it on our demo plan to remain, so we don't have any plans to remove it. Personally, we thought this was the better design when it comes to landscape screening. Really, if you guys want us to do the whole side with staggered evergreen trees, we have no issues with that. We'll leave it up to the planning commission for what you'd prefer. The item on barking dogs, the building's going to be fully enclosed. There'll be no outdoor sheltering of animals, so everything will be enclosed. The building's going to be well insulated. It's a modern building. I don't think any noise would get out, to any meaningful volume that would impact the neighbors in any way. And then, their operations shut down at 7 o'clock. So it's not like you're going to have, a lot of noise coming in and out in, after dinner time. I believe were there any other questions that I didn't answer there?
Would the animals be spending the night there, or is it just like daytime?
They do have an
operation?
option for, if an animal has an operation and, they want to keep them there for the night, but it's not,
So
it's not a stay and play kind of
so they don't need like any outdoor space then?
No, there's no outdoor spaces. It would just be, actually probably Commissioner Taylor probably knows this better than me, but if there's, serious operation and the dog or the cat needs to be within a specific environment, that's when they would stay the night.
And then Scott, I have a question on that drive. If it's only right out, do we like them to try to put like an island in so that they can't do that left turn out of there entering onto Alpine?
Yeah, again, we would defer to what MDOT wants. If you look
Okay.
up and down, it was kind of interesting to see the aerial view before
Yeah.
because it showed just how dynamic it is out there. You know, some places where, you know, they're right in, right out. Some places they're somewhat restricted, but then there's a lot of other ones that are just kind of wide open. So I think we'll defer to their wisdom on that. The idea of left-ins doesn't bother me. I think it's
Yeah.
the left-outs that really are
That's
the
what-
concern.
Okay, that's what I was just wondering is if we would suggest that or just go by MDOT with that.
Is there a spot that might be a pet relief area?
Nothing designated. I mean, the veterinary user looked at it. They didn't specify anything as a pet relief area. I'm sure some of our landscaping might function as a good option for that. But no, nothing specific.
I was gonna say,
How many veterinarians are gonna practice there?
There would be one main practitioner, and then there would be some support staff.
I was gonna say, as for the landscaping, I think with that fence staying, I'm okay if we stick with our old standard in that sense, because they kinda already have that 6 foot, it looked like it was like that 6 foot tall privacy fence, and then they already met that buffer of the old standard, but maybe if anybody else has any other opinion on that.
I agree with that. If the fence stays, the landscaping's fine. If you damage the fence, replace the fence, move the fence, whatever.
Mr. Chair, you're keeping the mature trees there on the fence row, right? You're not taking those down.
Yes, I believe they are on the neighbor's property. You can kind of see the fence. The fence is pretty close to the property line, and those mature trees right there are just on the other side.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't think we have, they're fully within their property.
Oh,
You
okay,
can see right
that's
there.
good.
That one back there, that one might be coming down just to configure our parking lot, but these mature trees over on that eastern side will be staying.
And I guess this is for Scott. Why aren't we connecting to the cross-access easement to the south there?
I don't believe there's an access easement on the neighbors, so I think in this case, they put it in there. You can see that there's some bollards that would go in, but it would be very close to the property line, so that when they come back, that I believe, is that Steak and Shake to the south?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so there's kind of a history there. When I started here, they gave us an easement and never signed it and recorded it, and then charged us $30,000 for it, so I'll remember this one when it comes up. I can promise that we'll get some.
Okay.
That came out of your salary, I suppose.
All right. Any other questions, comments for the applicant? All right,
Thank you for your time.
thank you. So, commissioners, there's some notes that I believe that Elena made with regard to possible conditions, but is anyone ready to offer a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion for case number 24-002, 3500 Alpine Avenue Northwest. Walker Retail Investments. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the site plan for new commercial building along with utilities, parking, landscaping, and other site improvements at 3500 Alpine Northwest, subject to following conditions and based on the findings of fact noted below. Conditions of site plan review approval, the applicant shall address all items outlined in the city engineer's report dated March 14, 2024. The applicant, number two, the applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineering plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of building or stormwater permits. Additional conditions, the applicant will, the facade of the building will conform to the medical shell building as it was submitted. And the landscaping plan as submitted is acceptable. Findings of fact per section 1808I, the dimensional arrangements of buildings and structure conforms to the required yards, setback, height, and other regulations of C1 zoning district. The proposed buildings have a compatible relation to the site terrain, landscaping, open space, and other buildings. The bulk, location, and height of proposed buildings will minimize any adverse effect to other development in the surrounding area, and will not place demands on public services or facilities exceeding capacity. Proper site drainage will be provided so that the removal of surface water will not adversely affect regulated natural areas, neighboring properties, or this public storm drainage system. The provisions for parking and for vehicle and pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety and will not place demands on public services or facilities more than capacity. Off-street parking and loading areas have been provided as required in a manner that will minimize effects on adjacent properties. Exterior lighting will not create undue hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets, nor damage the value or diminish the usability of adjacent properties. Lighting will be adequate for the safety of occupants or users of the site. Plant material will be used to enhance appearance of the site and to screen unsightly or harsh elements. Landscape buffers will be preserved or provided to ensure that proposed uses will be adequately buffered from one another and for surrounding public and private property. All buildings and structures will be arranged to permit sufficient access to emergency vehicles.
Okay, any questions or comments concerning the motion?
I second it.
Got a second? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Before you go, I should have asked this before. Is anyone else in the audience that has a question about this project? All right. Thank you. Timing. I know.
Still got it in though.
All right. Now we'll move to case number 24-003, site plan review for proposed industrial building addition. Paula, again, lead us in.
Thank you, Chair. We're heading west now from where we were, and we're in the industrial area along Northridge Drive. So here on Northridge, south of Hendershot, north of Walker Ridge, kind of in between that area, you'll find Ridgeview Industries. That is the location of the addition we'll be discussing next. This is the site plan. So this cover sheet here to the site plan is the full plan, property area. So Northridge Drive is over here. And as you approach, you can see the parking delineated in two different colors. So there's the gray, the access drive on the west of the building, the same on the east, and then parking in between. This parking area here that is not colored in with that gray is deferred parking. It's future parking. It's not in existence today. And then this is the proposed addition along the rear of the building. Just want to orient you for me to zoom in. This is the addition site plan that we're looking at today. So applicant Ridgeview Industries is requesting site plan review. So this site is zoned I-1 light industrial. It used to be zoned MP, which was industrial park, but as part of the zoning consolidation that took place with the updated ordinance, it's now I-1. For a 82,000 square foot industrial building expansion with new truck docks. Ridgeview Industries came to the Planning Commission for their original approval about 22 years ago, in 2002. The facility was constructed in 2003. For this project, the applicant met with Site Plan Review Committee on February 29th, earlier this year. And almost all of my comments and concerns were addressed either with the initial plan set or with the resubmission. I had some questions for the applicant about parking, and with the resubmittal, they provided some information on parking. So I'm gonna jump over here to my staff report. So this is a screenshot from that cover page of the plan set. There's the area inside the building, and then there's the number of employees that work on each shift, and the total parking that's currently constructed is 260 spaces. With the addition, there's no proposed new parking to be constructed. So as part of that, I wanted to ensure that there is enough parking on site for the uses according to our ordinance. We can clearly see there's enough parking for the employees that work there. Our ordinance has standards for parking, and so that's what you see, this kind of simplified math down here. In the new ordinance, manufacturing space is calculated differently from warehousing space. And so according to the applicant's team who I spoke with, once the new addition is in place, there'll be roughly 110,000 square feet of manufacturing area, which would require 138 spaces, 110,000 square feet of warehouse area, which would require 11 parking spaces, many fewer employees, you know, in a warehousing area than an active manufacturing space. And then there's this large office area out front of the building that you can see here. That's about 55,000 square feet of office area and 2 stories. Approximately 25,000 square feet of that area is occupied with office space, which would require 63 parking spaces. And the remainder of 30,000 square feet is staff amenity space. They can speak more to what that is, but I was told it's, you know, cafeteria space, and there's like a gym for the employees to use, those sort of things. So those are not separate areas other people are coming to. It's people already there using those spaces. They do not require additional parking. So with my calculations, they need to have 212 spaces, and on-site parking is 260. So it's my determination that the current parking exceeds the requirements of the ordinance. No additional parking is needed to account for the new additional manufacturing and warehouse space being added on. So with that being taken care of, in my estimation, the landscape requirements are my only other concern or point of discussion for this project. There's no additional landscaping needed with this type of addition. There's already landscaping along the street frontage and around the parking lots. It's not adjacent to any residential district, so that buffering that we talked about with the previous project does not apply here. However, I was told that there has historically been some concern raised about noise coming from the facility, and landscaping, screening can help buffer some of that noise. So that might be something the planning commissioners wish to discuss with the applicant to consider, if with the addition moving further north and the building moving closer, more truck docks, possibly more noise leaving the facility, if you wish to require some screening to account for that. Those two things being covered, overall, I do recommend approval of the addition, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Again, any questions, comments for Paula? Okay, move to Scott Connors, city engineer.
Well, my reports have been kind of boring tonight, and sadly, I've got more of the same here. So nothing too critical here. They do need to have the professional engineer responsible for design seal the plans. But other than that, the other 2 items have been resolved. So when you look at the new angle for that fire lane around the west side of the site, it kind of comes in at a strange angle. But they showed a fire truck template on there, and it worked just fine. And then where the 2 different water mains are shown on the east side of the site, that was an error in the drafting. There's only an existing 16-inch water main through there, and they've agreed to put that easement on with the final revision after this evening. So both those items should be resolved.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions for Scott at this point? All right, thank you. The applicant come forward, please.
Good evening, commissioners and engineers. Dan Van Kalker, FCC Construction. I don't have a great big pitch. It's a pretty boring box out of the back of another box. One thing I do want to clarify, this isn't an ideal drawing. If you could go ever so slightly closer, I want to make everybody, actually the next drawing I believe will give you, yes, I want to, nope, keep going if you will, right there. I want to clarify that that scrap dock is going to be sheeted and roofed. So that will continue on. It'll look as if the building is extended. It will be cold storage. So just to clarify that that is in addition to the 62,600 feet.
Will it have doors?
I'm sorry?
Will it have doors?
Yes, that'll have overhead doors, 24 by 22 foot, so that scrap is held in there and secure. Obviously alloy thieves love to get in there, especially when they're working on the important stuff. I think that was the majority of the questions.
Scott, do we have any requirement for the crushed aggregate drive going around for the fire? Like, do they have to plow that, or is there anything that we struggle with trying to like maintain that in the wintertime for fire, or how does that work?
Right, and that's an excellent point, that it does have to be maintained, so it doesn't work as a fire lane if it's just ignored throughout the winter, you're right. And then they're not allowed to put traditional gravel in there, it's gotta be a crushed concrete or millings in order to meet our dustless and not erodible surface.
Do you know, is the existing drive asphalt around that they have, or they don't?
I can't remember what it
Millings
is.
too?
The existing, probably shouldn't say this, the existing driveway is a bunch of poplar trees. Further exemplifying your,
Well, you said it.
I said it. It is a gravel drive. It is not paved.
Do we need any
The-
kind of agreement or anything for like making sure it's plowed or like maintaining it?
I think a little
Yes,
bit of
fire
diligence on
access.
everyone's part, you know, on the owner and then on the fire department too, to keep an eye on it. Obviously, they're not gonna go out there and plow it, but if they can see that they can't get around the building, you know, we need to make sure that we let them know. And
Well, if there's a
Stay on it.
stipulation that it needs to be plowed, I don't believe there will be hesitation from the owner. I mean, that is,
so there you go. I would make a condition just
I
to
mean,
kinda confirm
that's a logical condition. And that will help me sell why we're not gonna use boulders out there. With the understanding, also, the intention is, as soon as possible, this thing continues to increase and perform as the manufacturing facility, and we continue to go north. So,
Because you would have your trucks use the opposite drive out of that truck dock than on the other side of this picture, right?
yes, inbound steel and scrap goes out the west. Finished goods goes out the east. That's the way it is set up, and it will continue to be set up and moving forward. So it would not be used by anybody other than the fire department, but it's completely understood that it needs to be maintained throughout the winter in the event of a fire, with the understanding also that the goal is it will be in the way for the next addition. You know, we briefly talked about that conversation of what would it look like if it was all the way to the far north limits, but that hardly facilitates your necessity for proximity.
You guys are obviously pretty successful. You got 3 shifts. What do you do in this place?
I'm only the general contractor. What are they doing? They are, in this facility, they are taking the stamped parts that originate in Spring Lake or on 3 Mile. And at this facility right now, it is almost completely assembly. So it is MIG and TIG welding processes. So they are not stamping here. We are prepping it again if that is a necessity. So it will have deep foundations, and it will be built with a very heavy 10-inch floor to facilitate presses. But it's metal forming, and again, the business model that they have is more and more assembly and less cheap parts pounded out.
Paula, you mentioned potential or past noise complaints, or did I hear that correctly?
I'm wondering if that was from 3 Mile.
It
Seems odd that it would come from here. Welding is not a super loud operation.
I was told this by fellow staff members with longer tenure in Walker, and specifically noting that as the building moves north, they quoted that there had been stamping. So what there's never been stamping here?
No.
It possibly was from one of their other facilities.
They got 800-ton presses multiple 800-ton presses at 3 Mile. That would make a lot more sense. I've been the general contractor and even was a superintendent on this project 22 years ago.
So I
That
have
would
not
make more
personally
sense.
received any of the complaints. I was told they were historical.
Yeah.
Does any residential fall within like a notification?
No, let me show you. So there's residential here along Peach Ridge. That is the nearest residential. So it's, you know, a good distance and some trees away, but those stamping facilities can create a lot of noise.
Yeah, I was out there looking around from both sides, and there's a lot of area there with nothing. Right now, sound won't be an issue. If stamping goes in, you're gonna have to figure out, those things can thump for a very long ways. And with the residential along Peach Ridge, I think 1 or 2 lots, from what I can tell, go way back towards them, but there's nothing on them. So,
Ridgeview owns that entire Ridgeview owns all of that. I don't know that you guys can see what I'm about to point at, but yes, they own a pretty good swath, almost all the way to what is mowed coming in from the west. Nope, it would be to the east of their site.
Or they bought the lot to the east of lot.
They've always owned that, yes. And it even goes a little bit further into that tree line. That right there is our old furrow from when we pushed all of the topsoil there. That's that
yeah, that's
bright
what my
green
map
strip.
shows. And then there's 2 big lots there, but there's nothing on them. I don't
Right.
even know what they're,
Yeah,
I don't even
they're-
know what they're zoned, so.
The first one that Ridgeview has is industrial. That was all a part of the original plat that squares off all the way to the corner there that I've built those 3 buildings to the south.
But as it sits right now, I wouldn't worry about sound at all. That's my opinion.
It is being built as a facility capable of it, so, I mean, the conversation is valid. I guess to my, if I was defending that, I would say that this building is being built in a completely different standard. It has a completely different ventilation system, which is far in excess of 3 Mile or many others that ventilate through, leaving overhead doors open all summer. This has a system that circulates, I believe, 6 times an hour, and there's a lot more ventilation that goes on than just leaving overhead doors open. But
Is the technology for stamping progressed to a point where even if it were introduced here, that it may not have the adverse noise effects, or
in my opinion, and having put in multiple pits, it has more to do with the thump than the actual audible sound. It's truly the earth shaking. And when the earth shakes, that means you have a very poor fabricated pit, because now you're transferring that throughout your entire operation. You're driving your own employees crazy through technology, not necessarily in the stamping process, but through isolation, using, good soils, good compaction, and the isolation that we certainly strive for as we're putting these pits in. That's what will take care of it, because you think it's annoying to the neighbors, you should imagine working around them. It's severely detrimental also in calibration and keeping machines not trying to dance in unison. It's through that isolation that we can hopefully establish.
okay. Hey, at this point, is there anyone in the audience that has any questions or comments concerning this project? Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other comments or questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, any thoughts? Elena? Tyler?
Straightforward.
Pat?
Yep, no issues.
Scott? Joe? Yeah, same here. Is there anyone ready to offer a motion, please?
I'll make a motion for case number 24003 for 3039 Northridge Drive Northwest for Ridgeview Industries. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the site plan for industrial building expansion at 3039 Northridge Drive, Northwest, subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of facts below. Conditions of the site reviewed approval. The applicant shall address all the items outlined in the city's engineer report dated March 14th, 2024. The applicant should provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a building or stormwater permit. Findings of facts. The dimensional arrangement of buildings and structures conforms to the required yard, setbacks, heights, and other regulations of the I-1 zoning district. The proposed buildings have a compatible relationship to the site terrain, open space, and the other buildings. The bulk location and height of the proposed building will minimize any adverse effect to other developments in the surrounding area and will not place demands on public services or facilities exceeding capacity. Proposed site drainage will be provided so that the removal of surface waters will not adversely affect regulated natural areas, neighboring properties, or the public storm drainage system. The provisions for parking and for vehicle pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety and will not place demands on public services or facilities more than capacity. Off-street parking and loading areas have been provided as required in a manner that will minimize effects to adjacent properties. Exterior lighting will not create undue hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets, nor the damage or value or diminishing the usability of adjacent properties. Lighting will be adequate for the safety of occupants and users of the site. Landscaping buffers will be preserved or provided to ensure the property uses will be adequately buffered from one another and from surrounding public and private properties. All buildings and structures will be arranged to permit sufficient access for emergency vehicles.
You have a motion, is there support?
Did you want the provision of the northern road to be maintained?
Yeah, I'll add one condition to it as condition 3, that the drive on the north side of the property will be maintained during snow events for emergency vehicles.
Support.
Okay, if you have a motion and support. Any questions? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, now we're going to case number 24-004 for the 2000 Northridge Drive. Final site plan review. Again, Paula, if you could introduce the project, please.
Thank you, Chair. We're heading back east just a little ways on Northridge into the area east of Walker Avenue. So here, this is the Walker View planned unit development. So we're going in here, we're south of FedEx. In this area, there were several projects last year that were approved, a hotel along Walker Avenue and an industrial facility roughly here for a cabinet making facility. Immediately next to that facility is this proposed project that we're discussing here, case 24004 for 2000 Northridge Drive. It is an application brought by Optimus Energy LLC and Aaron Armstrong for a final area site plan review for a 10,470 square foot industrial building for an auto mechanic shop designed to service trucks, as well as a propane auto gas fueling station, along with the associated site improvements. You'll see that there is a proposed building to be constructed now and space for a future building. The uses are slightly different, but again, they're focused around repair and maintenance of large truck fleets. This applicant met with the Site Plan Review Committee on February 29th and was provided feedback. My report here will be relatively short for you because the applicant has addressed all of staff concerns related to planning and zoning. And so, in my estimation, these plans meet the Walker zoning ordinance regulations as to use, setbacks, conformity with the approved PASP, parking, loading, landscaping, and lighting. As this is a final area site plan, this is where we often see PUD benefits being requested, that the Planning Commission has flexibility to work with an applicant on. No PUD benefits were requested as part of this review, so they get my full support and a recommendation to approve. I can answer questions or show you more things on the site plan, but here's the landscaping requirements. With the new ordinance, it primarily focuses along street frontage and parking lot landscaping. So there's a lot of that you'll see here. And lighting plans, I've got building floor layouts and other things that the board may wish to see. And the elevations for the facility. But in my estimation, it's pretty good to go.
All right, thank you, Paula. Any comments or questions at this point? Okay, thank you. I'll move to Scott Connors, City Engineer.
So this one's a little bit more exciting. The first two propane tanks that they'd like to put in fit pretty squarely in, outside of the easements that are there, and I think they can come up with a fairly level spot for those. The next two would be the ones that are east and west and on the southern end of the six, and those are outside of the public utility easement. They are on a little bit of a slope, but they have a pretty innovative way to put those in. Those should be fine. But if they get to the point where they want to put, I guess what I called number 5 and 6 tanks in, those would be inside of that 55-foot public utility easement, so they would not be allowed there. The good news for that is I think they have some time to work with the city of Grand Rapids, who that easement is to try to reduce the width of that easement. Because originally, when this was under the ownership of, I get these wrong all the time, I think it's Dream Stage. So Dream Stage was going to be putting some condominium units through here at one point, and so the easements were laid out for that design, and that's been dismissed for about 20 years now. But the sanitary sewer still goes through this spot, and then the water main ends at the west end of the site, does not need to be extended anymore. So I think they can do that, but that's going to be on them to work through that. So I guess I want to make sure that that goes on the record, that they need to do that homework before they would get to the point where they would put those extra tanks in. So I think as long as you were considering our memorandum, then we would consider that to be a condition. The other two issues we have, the grading in the area of the future building seems to direct the water right at the proposed building, and we're a little bit concerned there because the grades are the same grades as the first floor. We'd rather see them mound that up a little bit and move the water east to west, or drop a catch basin in there. We don't typically like to do that if you're going to put a building over it in the future, because sometimes those things get hidden, and then pretty soon you've got interior stuff going into the storm sewer. But there's certainly a solution there. They just need to present it. And then the last item, similarly, on the proposed building, we want to make sure that there's interior floor drains for those wash bays. When you put trench drains right outside the doors, the garage doors for something, you generally kind of think, oh, that's where they're going to sweep all the bad stuff. And that they can't do that. That would be an illicit discharge to the public storm sewer system. All that bad stuff needs to go through the sanitary sewer system, where it's cleaned out and treated. So we want to make sure that that's a stipulation as well. Those are our comments.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions for Scott? Okay, seeing none. The applicants want to come forward, please.
My name is Adam Feenstra with Feenstra & Associates, a design engineer. Aaron Armstrong is there. He's the proprietor of this facility. We're excited to finally be here. What planning didn't tell you is that we're scoping out another site, which didn't work out in the first place, and so we've been at this process for quite a while already. So we're happy to be here. On Scott's comments, we can definitely make some revisions there to clarify how that stormwater will go on that future building area. Another thing on that future building area is the timeline could be fairly short between construction of this facility and construction of that addition. So if possible, we would like to make sure it's clear in this approval that the future building is also approved. Obviously, if there are changes to the site and changes to the building area outside what's typically administratively able to be handled, then we'd have to come back for site plan approval. But if it ends up being that that building addition goes up in a year, we would love to be able to just go straight to the building department for that. So if you could consider that, we would appreciate it. In terms of the tanks, as Scott mentioned, those have been a little challenging. We are actually negotiating with DreamStage to purchase an additional 26 feet of property to the south. That'll give us the room to much more easily fit those tanks in there, all lined up right in a row next to each other, fully outside the sewer easement. We actually have had conversations with Grand Rapids about it, and they actually came back, and I was surprised to hear that they did not want to see that easement reduced at all. They had some future ideas that may need it for, so they were very hesitant to release anything to us. So, but that's okay. As I said, we're in the process of getting some extra property to the south to make sure that we can handle those tanks, no problem. And then, yes, Scott also noted the interior drainage. We do have a note on our plan next to the storm sewer information stating that that those need to be separated, so we have no problem with that condition. Other than that, it's a little bit different site with the propane fueling station. There's not too many of those around, but between that and the heavy duty truck auto body and mechanic shop, we think it'll be a site that sees a lot of good use.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions?
Paul, a question on how that would work if with that future building question that he had.
Generally, this is a final area site plan, and if you give me a moment to look it up, in our old ordinance, a final area site plan is valid for 2 years, and that extension requires them to come back and ask for that from the Planning Commission and explain why it took that amount of time. A standard site plan approval is 1 year, but
Sorry, I couldn't remember if it got updated or not. I was trying to-
let me look for that and I will get back to you.
Thanks.
I guess along those lines, when you went through the zoning review, did you include that future building in terms of the analysis?
Sorry,
sorry.
what the ordinance says here, this is in the site plan review chapter. I'll get you the reference. This is section 11.02I, commencement and completion of construction. Construction shall be commenced within 2 years following official approval of a final area site plan for all or any phase of a PUD. Each phase of a multi-phased project shall be commenced within 2 years of the schedule established for such project in the application submitted. So you could tonight give them up to 4 years of approval for a phase 2 of this project if the board wished to do that. Otherwise, a standard final area site plan approval is good for 2 years.
I was going to add too that from the engineering standpoint, we're not worried about that future building at all. It's really just some minor grading changes because they've already designed the site around the multi-level nature of that facility.
And from my perspective, parking, landscaping, other things, they've have adequate parking and things on site for both the proposed building and what is here called the future building. I would be comfortable with an approval for both.
I guess I don't have any concerns extending it to the 4 years if you think that that's necessary, and how the rest of the board feels about that.
And now, if they indicated that they're acquiring additional property, will that won't trigger any need to come back for any follow-up approval?
Not not, from my perspective, they're adjusting the lot lines and the building is not changing. I don't know if Scott has comments as regards to the location of the tanks moving.
I would say, if you're comfortable giving staff the latitude to work with them on the orientation of the tanks, that we could consider that at staff level.
Okay. In terms of, you show on the site plan, I think, representation of where the tractor trailer could be parked. Is that correct?
So on the site plan, there is a turning movement for what would be the refueling tanker. The propane fueling stations themselves are really designed to handle a maximum of like a box truck, which is much easier turning radius. And obviously the repair facility itself is designed to handle up to a box truck. Any full semis can obviously be handled too, because they won't have a trailer attached when they're getting fixed. But that's why too we have the larger parking spots. We wanted to make sure that there was a place to park these larger vehicles when they're not in the facility itself. So it does get a little tight with that big refueling tanker, but we wanted to make sure, as you can see, we included a kind of outline of that full tanker there, so we could make sure that even if all the fueling stations were occupied at the time that tanker happens to pull in, he's got somewhere he can fully pull into the site safely. So he's out of the street, not impacting any traffic, and then he'll just have to wait 5 to 10 minutes for the vehicles to finish their fueling operation before he can pull through and refill those big tanks. So it's tight, but it will be very workable.
Just the concern it could be for this one is once you've got vehicles waiting to be fixed, and some that have been done and they're waiting to be picked up, is there sufficient room on the property to, as this case suggesting that you could have 4 semi-tractor trailer rigs there, either getting ready to go in or have been finished and they're ready to be picked up?
The tractor trailer rigs would fit in those enlarged parking spots that we have.
Okay, and 4 would be sufficient for them?
We've got 10 of those spots.
10 of those spots.
I apologize, I didn't point those out in my review. So there's a number of standard parking spaces for a vehicle. And then here on the
gotcha.
southern west side, and then another, I believe there's several more here
Okay.
on the south side that are those larger parking spaces, 12 feet wide and 35 feet long.
Okay, answers my question. I should have looked closer myself. Any other comments, questions?
Do they need 35 feet long? Because it looks like that backside is only 27 foot long.
On
that
the
south side. Yeah, we
this
just
side,
have the
no.
35 there. But is the 27 okay on that? Would that be the southern side?
So on the western side, yeah, those are a little longer. They're backing up to what's a very steep slope. So we wanted to make sure. I actually designed lengthwise these for a box truck, because box truck is longer than a semi without the trailer. So we wanted to make sure that a box truck could fit on the west side. And then on the south side, the plan is the box trucks would be backing in, and it's a steep slope down. So the back 5 to 10 feet of the truck would overhang the slope a little bit with wheel stops to prevent them from going too far. So like 27 feet, I don't recall offhand how long a standard tractor trailer is.
Is there
but-
concern if it's going to overhang going towards those propane tanks or not with the grade slope or grade change there?
Not really. As I said, we'll have parking stops there. They'd have to hit those pretty hard, and I don't think anyone would want to fall down a slope like that, especially with the tanks there. So people would be very careful. Also, typically, the people who are going to be parking vehicles in those big spots are going to be the employees at the site, who are either taking the vehicle after the customer drops it off and parking it for storage, or once the vehicle is repaired, parking in these spots. So it's with employees using those spots most often, that's not a large concern of mine.
Commissioners, any additional comments, questions?
I'll make a motion. Based on the application material provided, I make a motion to approve the final area site plan for a new 10,470 square foot industrial building, propane fueling station, and other site improvements at 2000 Northridge Drive Northwest, pin 411301600035, including the future building as presented, provided the construction of that future building occurs within 4 years of the date of approval, and subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of fact noted below. The conditions of the final area site plan review approval include the application shall address all the items outlined in the city engineer's report dated March 14th, 2024. The applicant shall provide 3 sealed sets of civil engineered plans incorporating the recommended conditions to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of the building or stormwater permits. Number 3, work with the city staff to determine final placement of future tanks, propane tanks. And the findings of fact are as follows. The PUD, as described by the final area site plan dated 3/6/2024, does continue to meet the standards contained in the preliminary area site plan requirements, section 1102 C7 of the zoning ordinance. The final area site plan is in substantial compliance with the previously approved preliminary area site plan, consisting of maps and accompanying written materials. The applicant has made provision satisfactory to the Planning Commission that open space areas on the plan have been irrevocably committed for that purpose, and that maintenance plans are in place for those areas. The PUD does comply with the uses permitted by the IPUD district and the uses approved within the related PASP.
Okay, we have a motion.
Support.
Support by Pat. Any questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're on the home stretch. This is a review of an administrative review case. And Paula, if you could kind of go over it, please.
Sure, I will make this short and sweet. So I'm flying back over here to Alpine Avenue. We're looking at this facility here on the southwest corner of Alpine and Old Orchard, LaFontaine Ford. It's a car dealership. As administrative site plan reviews come in, after they're reviewed by staff, I'm to present them to the board at a public meeting. So this is one that my coworker Megan Gorby wrote the report on. We reviewed together. So here is the site plan. The existing building is here. You can see they're gonna do some changes to the parking immediately around the building and add this small under 2,000 square foot addition here. Upon review, it is a property zoned C2 general commercial, built in 1972 according to our best record searches. The use of automobile sales is allowed in this area with special land use approval. The plan was reviewed and approved. It meets the standards in the ordinance for administrative site plan review, being that it is an addition of less than 25% of the building size or 5,000 square feet, whichever is smaller. In this case, it's under 5,000 square feet. There's sufficient parking on the site. The alterations include bringing the property into compliance with ADA accessibility, ramps, and things with this new addition in the front of the building with a new entrance. And then this is kind of a showroom addition and office space. So this project was approved by staff and shared back with the applicant. Just wanted to make sure that we do the formal notification of that to the board, and that's all that I have on that, unless the board has any questions.
Any questions for Paul on that?
Okay, and then just quickly, if it's appropriate, for the next meeting on April 3rd, we have one case, again, on Northridge, at 1920 Northridge. We'll have a new I-1 industrial building. And then we'll also do some discussion led by me regarding master plan amendments. We'll be discussing sections of the master plan related to significant undeveloped lots. Possible increases to add gentle density, some areas that might make sense to increase to allow more duplexes in neighborhoods where they fit, and then also making sure the RPUD 3, that new district, is included in the master plan as well. So we'll talk about those 3 topics at the next meeting.
All right.
It's spring break week, everybody gonna be here?
I don't have any kids that young, so.
Yeah.
And I don't go anywhere, it's my birthday, it's too expensive.
All we need is 5.
Yeah.
I'm around.
What, no Cabela's gonna be added to Northridge? Oh.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
One more thing I might add here, we've got a couple of really big construction projects that are gonna get an early start, so be prepared for some big road closures. Kinney between Lake Michigan and Leonard, and then the Bristol Railroad Bridge is the other one, both starting on Monday. And there'll be more activity, but those are probably the biggest, most obstructive ones for us traveling around.
Grand Rapids has got Collindale down right now.
Saw that.
It's north, south.
And then when Kinney goes down, hopefully they're staggered, where Kinney's.
Was there any comment, was there a public thing on the Bristol Bridge? Was there any comment, any public comment of interest on that?
There was. I was kind of surprised because we've had several meetings on that, and they've usually been 99% positive, but we did have a few folks with a long history in that area that had some differing opinions. I even watched some people wrestle with each other a little bit about, I think sidewalk's good, I hate sidewalk, back and forth. But I think the strangest one was that one resident liked the bridge just the way it was, and wanted it to stay exactly like that with
That blew me
the
away.
one lane. And but we're there to listen as much as anything else, and that's what we did.
It's history, I mean,
So-
come on, it's,
Oh, come on, it's a dump.
I graffitied that thing twice when I was a kid. Spray paint at 2 in the morning.
There you go. Hey, we should all go do that before it starts.
That's right.
Like it the way it is. Holy smokes. Oh, there it is.
Hey, Scott, I saw that you're gonna raise it. Do you have to dig down to have the traffic go down? I didn't go to the thing, but I
I
was
just
just
like
curious.
how it's slightly cocked in there.
So yeah, the railroad is going up 2.5 feet, and the road is going down 2 feet. So
Okay.
in both of those things are happening.
Yep.
Very cool.
Tom?
Close it.
You need to make a motion to adjourn.
Is every meeting?
Yeah.
You guys plan this? I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
We've all put in our
I'll
time.
support.
All in favor?
Yeah, bye.
Motion carried. Thank you.